What do you get when you mix immigration policy with the federal budget? A very high stakes showdown. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Bill Number, the podcast where we take the fine print of legislation and turn it into something you can actually follow and maybe enjoy a little bit. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Stephen, and today's episode is all about immigration policy, but not in the way you usually hear about it, particularly from us, as we tend to do quite a lot on immigration.
No campaign speeches, no border footage. Today, we're diving into something more Washington, the budget process.
Yes, absolutely. Everyone loves a bit of budget process, which, to be fair, it's where a lot of the most important decisions actually get made, particularly in Congress.
It really is. It's where the rubber meets the road, as they like to say.
Absolutely. We have mentioned before how completely crazy the American budget process is, but it is worth just touching on it again. It is completely crazy. So no other country that I know of certainly does it this way. Every country raises taxes, and every country then has to decide how it's going to spend those taxes. And normally the government of the day gets to decide how they're going to spend the taxes. That's sort of what you elect them for. It's pretty much the 90% of what you elect them for is so that they get to choose how to spend your tax money. But not in America, of course. No. In America, the opposition gets to veto what the government is going to do, even though the people didn't vote for them. It's completely insane. But in the UK, we have a budget every year, and it's a big deal. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, who's at number 11 Downing Street, will come out into the street and hold up this battered red briefcase, which is the traditional briefcase they've used for centuries because, it's Britain, to put all the documents in. And there's all sorts of pomp and ceremony around it. And then she goes and spends some time in the House of Parliament, presents her plan for the next 12 months. The opposition say, oh, that's terrible, we hate it, it's terrible. And then there's a debate, and then there's a vote. And this is the most important vote of the year because they have to vote the budget. They have to actually approve the budget. But of course, it's just a straight majority vote. And because the government has a majority and the MPs wouldn't dream of voting against the budget because it would bring the government down, the government always wins. On those rare occasions in history when they haven't, it has literally mean that there's then going to have to be an election to choose a new government, because if you can't get your budget through, what can you do? You don't shut things down. You don't stop paying people. not pay the people who are charged with defending the president from getting shot just after someone's tried to shoot the president. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts.
Yeah, I mean, it's so crazy. And it's also so interesting how all of these different initiatives are trying to get snuck in, and all these really creative approaches. I feel like over the last 2 years, all we've really been appreciating more and more is that there is some very creative ways that people are trying to word legislation, pass legislation, sneak things in here and there. And I feel like the budget is the number one battleground for that. So
It is. We'll get into the details of this and the eye-watering sums of money that are being spent on like immigration enforcement and the like. But it's worth just putting, I think, the whole economy in a global context. So at the moment, the entire global economy is suffering some severe shocks, has been for some time. In fact, in the UK and most of Europe, we've never really recovered from 2008. So we're still suffering from 2008. Thanks very much for that, guys. So we've been looking at less than 1% growth over those years on average. It's just dreadful. And meanwhile, the costs of government benefits and all that kind of stuff has gone through the roof. So we are in deep, deep trouble. With the idea that we could have tens and tens of billions of dollars to spend on things that frankly aren't crucial would be, oh my God, our Chancellor would absolutely love that. She'd actually be able to do something for a change rather than just saying, oh, I'm going to have to raise taxes again, which is what's happening. And it's the same everywhere, and it's getting worse. And we're obviously looking at a massive economic shock, which will probably cause a global recession over the next few months because of everything that's going on in the Middle East. And yet in the United States, you're squabbling over spending tens of billions of pounds on masked vigilantes wandering the streets, snatching people and putting them into concentration camps. It's just the weirdest thing, because that's not what the American people care about. The American people care about the same as everything else, which is, the price of eggs and the price of gas and all of those kind of things. It's just a weird disconnection from the political class.
Yeah, it does really feel like the times that we're in right now, and what the politicking is politicking versus what people care about and what is influencing them has really, there's never been a greater gap between those two things, in my opinion.
It's the perfect opportunity for politicians on both sides of the aisle to say, look, we're in a crisis. There's a world crisis with oil and the Straits of Hormuz, all of that. We're at war. It's time to put aside these relatively petty differences for a while. Let's just agree to shelve these questions for a while and move on to talk about more important things. And by the way, let's not spend all of these billions of pounds on ICE just yet. Instead, let's use it to sort of, relieve the pressure on American consumers. Something like that they could do, but there just doesn't seem to be any sign of that.
No, there really doesn't. Okay, so right now Congress is debating whether to pour about 70 billion with a B more into ICE and Border Patrol, and that decision is setting off a true chain reaction across the states.
Oh, yes, it is indeed. And of course, if you want to track this kind of federal state ripple effect in real time, this is a perfect example of where Bill Track 50 actually shines, because you can follow not just the federal bills, but the 100 plus related state bills that have popped up in response.
Yes, and there's so much going on here. So I guess let's just start at the top. What exactly did the Senate just do?
Okay, so on April 23rd, senators voted 50 to 48 to advance a budget resolution. So unsurprisingly, all Democrats voted against the measure. All of the Republicans voted for it. So this might sound very procedural, and it is really, but it's also extremely strategic. And it opens the door for this $70 billion in additional funding. Remember, this isn't $70 billion to fund ICE. This is additional funding on top of the funding they've already got to fund ICE and the Border Patrol over the next 3 years. And the resolution would then move the measure to the House. Now, the important thing, though, is that it sets up a potential reconciliation process which would allow Republicans to bypass a filibuster in the Senate and actually manage to pass this bill in the face of opposition from Democrats.
Okay, so this isn't just about funding, it's about how to pass that funding.
Yes, exactly. Reconciliation is the key here. It's essentially a legislative shortcut for budget-related measures, and it's the only way that the governments of the day can actually pass their budgets if they don't have support from the opposition. Of course, they're supposed to go out and get support from the opposition, but if they don't have that, they can only really do it through this reconciliation process, because, of course, you need 60 senators in the Senate to actually pass it. They don't have them.
And this is where things get super interesting, because the funding is tied to something else, right?
Yes, of course. So everyone will be aware that there is a partial Department of Homeland Security shutdown that's been going on since mid-February. So Democrats are refusing to back this legislation that includes ICE funding without sweeping changes to immigration enforcement practices. People remember they don't want them to wear masks, they want to have to identify themselves, but really curb what they see as the excesses of the behavior over the past few months. And of course, this is all following events in January when 2 US citizens were killed by ICE agents in Minnesota. So immigration enforcement funding is stalling the funding for other key agencies such as the TSA and even the Secret Service.
Ah, yes, those incredibly long TSA lines that we have been seeing.
Yeah.
So this is a classic Washington leverage. Policy changes tied to must-pass funding.
Yes, exactly. It turns a policy debate into a deadline-driven decision. And so far, Republicans have refused to accept the various compromises on offer, such as like funding parts of DHS without this controversial ICE funding.
Okay, so let's talk numbers, because they are pretty striking.
Yes, they are really. So the administration has already directed roughly $170 billion towards immigration enforcement through 2029. And this new proposal would add another $70 billion on top of that. And that funding is to support increased detention capacity, expanded enforcement operations, higher staffing levels. Yes, they're going to lock up even more people, and they're going to hire even more of those masked agents.
That is a lot of money. Okay, and we're talking about detention levels already exceeding 68,000 people with capacity of going to over 100,000 people.
Yes, 100,000 people. This isn't incremental, it's a major scale up. Remember, these aren't 100,000 criminals being locked up in prison. These are 100,000 potential illegal immigrants who are being detained prior to the process and so on in these facilities that are popping up all over the country. And let's just put in a bit of context here. So the total annual funding for ICE would be roughly equivalent to the entire defense budget of France, a major power. Now, obviously, President Trump has been highly critical of European countries for not spending enough on defense, and he's not wrong. He's not wrong. But France does a pretty good job, actually, and certainly recent events have shown that their military is pretty robust compared to a lot of other countries like the UK. And this is ICE funding is the same as France actually spend on their entire military. And it really does beg that question. A cost of living crisis, perhaps there might be better ways to spend that money?
You know, maybe it could be better ways. Now let's let's layer in the politics because this didn't just come out of nowhere.
No, immigration was dare I say, the central issue in the 2024 election. And the current administration has emphasized visible, active enforcement. So the strategy has been to increase capacity, increase visibility, and reinforce this message that enforcement is the top priority of the government.
But that approach has also created some political friction, we could say.
You can say a little bit of friction, yes. So especially after enforcement action in places like Minnesota, obviously there were massive protests and these huge calls across the country for increased oversight of exactly what ICE are doing. And let's not forget the legal side of it as well, because obviously you detain all of these people. You then need lawyers to actually put them through legal processes. ICE just didn't have enough people. They were completely swamped. And so they were constantly in violation of various judges' court orders, asking them to release people. So it's been an absolute mess, actually. And in a lot of states has caused a lot of problems. And not only in blue states, actually. This has happened, obviously, across the whole country.
Yeah, it has happened literally across the entire country. But it seems like there's a lot of response from Democrats to this and this funding push in particular.
Yes, absolutely. So the Democrats are trying to step up here and they're doing what they can. So they're focusing on oversight and accountability. So the argument is that before expanding this funding any further, Congress needs to ensure stronger transparency on what's going on and clear limits on the enforcement practices that are happening. Let's not be, snatching children out of their bed in the middle of the night, that kind of thing. Limit it a little bit.
Okay, all right, some limits. So the debate isn't just more or less enforcement. It's also what are the rules we're doing this enforcement under?
Yes, exactly. I mean, the Democrats, I think, are being a little bit cautious here because they know that they got hammered last time because they were seen as soft on immigration. So they can't do that again. But they also know they're on a winner because Americans just don't like to see masked men roaming the streets, snatching people up. It's not a good look.
It does not evoke a feeling of safety, I will say.
It doesn't.
Okay, but this is also where the story really expands because somehow this can expand even further. This isn't just happening in Congress.
No, not even close. So there are currently over 100 state-level bills related to ICE and immigration enforcement following the events in Minnesota and elsewhere, which obviously created this enormous friction between the federal immigration enforcement mechanisms, particularly ICE, but other agencies as well, and then state law enforcement as well. The big question, of course, is should they be working together on this? Should they be opposed, or should the state law enforcement people just be stepping out and saying nothing to do with us?
Right, and this is where I just love Bill Check 50, and it becomes so useful because you can literally map these bills across the country and see how states are reacting. You can see how many bills are in the states, which states are doing it. So let's break down the state divide, starting with the Democratic-led states. What are they actually doing legislatively to push back?
Yes, so this is where it gets really, really concrete. So the blue states aren't just talking about limiting cooperation, they're writing it directly into law. So take Maryland, for example. Bills like Maryland SB 791, HB 1575 are designed to restrict how much state and local law enforcement can work with federal immigration authorities. They limit things like detention based on civil immigration requests and also sharing certain types of information.
So that's essentially drawing a line between local policing and federal immigration enforcement.
Yes, exactly. And you see the same approach in Massachusetts with bills like H5305 and H5316, which are all about defining and limiting how far local agencies can go in assisting ICE.
And then Colorado has been really active here too, right?
Oh, yes. Obviously been a big issue in Colorado. So HB 1276 add reporting requirements, privacy protections, and even restrictions around deportation transports. So it doesn't just limit the cooperation, it makes it much more visible and legally risky.
Yes, there's also a huge initiative here in Denver to make sure that if there are ICE agents here, they can't cover their faces. But also, this is not just a don't cooperate. It's if you do, we're watching closely.
Yes, exactly. So a lot of the biggest worries about this enforcement is that there's just not that oversight there. There's so many people doing so many things and no one's really watching them. I mean, particularly if you think about these detention facilities that are springing up. I mean, do they have proper oversight? I mean, it's an absolute classic case that if you put people who aren't properly trained in charge of prisoners in effectively a prison, things tend to go wrong fast. So, are there actually all of those proper mechanisms in place? So this is just one step step I think that Colorado is doing to try and say, let's just keep a much closer eye on exactly what's going on and make sure that they are actually abiding by their own rules. And then you can have a look at Delaware. Delaware's already gone a step farther. HB 182 has been signed into law and actually prohibits law enforcement from entering into 287G agreements with ICE altogether. 287G is the code for the federal program that allows state and local law enforcement agencies to partner with ICE and carry out certain immigration enforcement functions.
Okay. So this is a big deal because 287G is basically how police can become extensions of this federal immigration enforcement that we've been seeing.
Yes, absolutely. And it's absolutely crucial. If you're going to do it properly, intent on actually scooping up all of these people, you need to know where they are. And that kind of local knowledge, the local police can be really, really important rather than a bunch of people from out of state coming in, trying to find the right people. They're going to struggle. So the cooperation of local agencies is absolutely crucial to ICE operations. And so if you want to stop ICE operating properly, then that's what you do and stop this cooperation. And there is a through line here as well. So these states are treating cooperation with ICE as a civil liberties issue and closing off the legal pathways that allow it, or of course even compel it as well. So there are certain various conventions and so on that local law enforcement should work very closely with federal law enforcement to actually carry out activities. So they're really trying to draw a line under this and say, well, not when it comes to ICE.
Okay, so if the blue states are closing doors, what are the red states doing?
Well, unsurprisingly, they are opening them, and in some cases, installing automatic door openers and those wedges that stop them closing again. So, I mean, take Mississippi. So, Mississippi HB 538 has already been enacted, and it bans sanctuary-style policies outright. So, local government just don't have the option to cooperate; they are actually expected to.
Okay, so that flips the default. Cooperation isn't optional anymore.
No, exactly. And Tennessee is going even further with bills like SB 6002, HB 6001, which strengthen requirements for state and local agencies to work with federal immigration authorities.
Okay, and some states are even mandating participation in federal programs, right?
Yes, West Virginia is a great example. So HB 5477 would require law enforcement agencies to participate in the 287G program, while West Virginia SB 615 mandates communication and coordination with ICE.
Okay, so instead of limiting involvement, they're formalizing it.
Yes, exactly. And then you've got efforts like in California, AB 85, which unsurprisingly didn't pass, but would have required broader cooperation in certain criminal cases.
Okay, so even in a blue state, you're still seeing that push.
Yes, right. And Illinois, Republican lawmakers in Illinois introduced a whole slate of bills like HB 4129, SB 1202, which are aimed at rolling back restrictions on cooperation. Again, in Illinois, they're very unlikely to pass.
Okay, so big picture, red states are treating cooperation with ICE as a public safety requirement, not as a policy choice.
Yes, exactly. If blue states are building barriers, red states are building bridges, and in some cases requiring everybody to march across them.
Okay, and then there's the Minnesota of it all.
Absolutely. Minnesota, of course, was where this all blew up. I mean, there was some stuff in California beforehand, but Minnesota was really the epicenter of the resistance to this as the site of Operation Metro Surge, where there were thousands of arrests, mass protests, obviously that fatal shooting of US citizens, and that really shifted the political conversation fast. And in fact, could force the government to actually draw back a lot of this and really scale back a lot of the things they were doing anyway.
Right, because that's when policy turns into something that people are reacting to in real time. It's not just words on a bill in Washington.
Yes, exactly. And you're seeing that reaction now play out in legislation as well. So on the Democrat side, you've got bills like HF 3413, SF 3842, HF 3924, SF 4992, all aimed at limiting state and local involvement in federal law enforcement. So loads and loads of bills, as you might expect. The lawmakers are really responding to what was going on there.
So it's kind of creating distance from what happened during the surge.
Absolutely. And making sure that it can't happen again, really. But Republicans are pushing in the opposite direction. Also got HF 16, SF 643, which would block the sort of non-cooperation policies that we saw happening during the surge.
Okay, so one state, two completely different responses to the same situation.
Yes, absolutely. And obviously completely polarized, completely partisan, everybody going along party lines. And Minnesota, of course, isn't just part of the story. It's really the entire debate compressed into one state. And I think Minnesotans, quite angry about the whole thing.
Yeah, they seem to be ground zero for a lot of stuff these days.
Really do.
Okay, so all of this state level activity is happening while Congress is fighting its own battle, and it's beyond the budget.
Yes, exactly. The budget is like the big battle because it's the one that might actually go anywhere. And it determines obviously how big the overall system is and how it's all funded. But there are other bills that are actually policy bills determine how it would actually work. So on the Republican side, you can see a clear push in Congress to expand cooperation nationally and to block states from actually putting into force all of these barriers. You got bills like HR 756, which aims to protect partnerships between ICE and local law enforcement. You've got HR 7423, HR 7612, HR 7640, all of these bills that are trying to push states and cities towards cooperating with federal agencies.
Okay, so the federal government isn't just funding the enforcement, they're trying to standardize it.
Yes, exactly. And unsurprisingly, Democrats are going the other way. You've got HR 6521, which would limit certain enforcement practices. And then you've got HR 6890 that would eliminate the 287G program entirely.
Huh. Well, okay. So even Congress has this divide that we're seeing in the states.
Yes, exactly. One side trying to expand the system outwards, the other trying to pull it back in. Of course, the difference in Congress is that none of these bills are really going to pass. Highly unlikely that any of them could make it over the finish line.
Okay, so zooming out, this isn't just a debate about funding. That's kind of what we've been hearing a lot about, but it's really a structural one.
Yes, absolutely. So Washington can fund the machine, but the states are deciding whether to supply the gears.
Okay, so what is the path forward here?
Well, procedurally then, the House still needs to act on the budget resolution. Reconciliation could allow the passage without a filibuster, but internal party unity will be key for the Republicans. Politically, immigration remains a strong issue, but there's a growing debate over enforcement methods. ICE and the immigration enforcement push in general is increasingly unpopular across the country.
Okay, so momentum exists, but it's not frictionless.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so when we zoom out all the way, this really isn't just one bill or one budget fight. It's something a lot bigger. This is one of those moments where the trend matters more than the headline. What we're watching is a fundamental shift in how immigration policy actually operates here in the US. Not just at the border, not just in Congress, but all across all levels of government at once.
Yes, absolutely. Because the federal government can fund enforcement, but it can't fully control how it plays out on the ground. The age-old story of the federal system.
Oh, yes, exactly. Okay, so Congress could pass this funding, but even if it tries to pressure states with legislation, it's kind of in the end, states are going to decide whether enforcement expands smoothly or they run into resistance. And right now, they're making very different choices across the states.
Yes, which is why this can't be resolved neatly.
Yes, nothing is neat here anymore. Okay, so the likely outcome here isn't just one national policy. It's that patchwork system that we keep talking about that's honestly going to probably get more divided over time. And some states are going to be actively cooperating, expanding enforcement, integrating with federal programs. Others are really going to be limiting that cooperation, adding legal barriers, and pushing back.
Yes, that's right. So depending on where you are, immigration enforcement could look completely different. And that's why tools like Bill Track 50 really matter here, because this isn't a one bill story. It's not even a one state story. There are hundreds of bills moving across the country right now, all shaping different pieces of this puzzle.
And it's almost impossible to track manually.
Yes, absolutely. So Bill Track 50 lets you actually see the full landscape, what's moving in Congress, what's happening in the states, how trends are developing, and where things are heading next.
Which is kind of the whole point of this podcast.
Yes, exactly. We go beyond the bill number.
All right, so that's it for today's episode of Beyond the Bill Number. If you want to explore the bills yourself or keep up with what's coming up, you know where to go.
Yep, we'll be back next time with another story where the fine print matters a lot more than it looks.
See you next time.